record of Assurbanipal. And the last record was 42, and this one is going to be, oh, I don't see it numbered beyond, oh, 4. In my first expedition, I went against Musur, Egypt, and Meroe, Tarku'u, the king of Musur, and Ku'use, Ethiopia, whom Assur-Haddon, the father who begat me, had subdued, returned out of his land, trusting in his strength, his hands. He despised the commandments of Assur and Istar, the great entities, my lords. His heart was hardened, and he sinned of his own will. The kings, satraps, and generals, whom Assur-Haddon, my father, had set over the kingdom of Egypt, were driven out by him. They betook themselves to Nineveh, Nineveh. Against such deeds my heart was moved, and my bile, well, literally says his liver, was stirred up. I numbered my army and my whole forces with the great entities, and filled my hands to bring help to the kings, satraps, generals, servants, who were expecting my presence. Space. I set before speedily and came to the city of Carbonet, Campus, when Tarku'u, the king of Egypt and Ethiopia, in the city of Memphis, heard of the arrival of my expedition. He prepared for battle his munitions of war and counted the host of his warriors. Tarku'u, king of Egypt and Ethiopia, despised the entities. He put in motion his strength to take possession of Egypt. He disregarded the commandments of the great entity Assur, my lord. He trusted in his own strength and did not observe his own treaties, which my father who begat me made. He came from Ethiopia and entered Memphis and took that city for himself. Upon the Assyrians, the men of Assur, who were my servants in Egypt, expecting my presence, whom Assur-Haddon, my father, had set over the kingdom in it. He ordered his army to inflict death, imprisonment, and plunder. A messenger came in haste to Nineveh, and some illegible parts, we don't know what's missing here. On account of such deeds, my heart was moved, and my bile was stirred. I was incensed and ordered by an imperative decree the Tartan general, the satrap, with the men of their hands, and my chief guards to start on an expedition to the help of the kings, satraps, and servants. I ordered an expedition to be made to Egypt. They went down quickly and came to Carbonet. Tarku, the king of Ku'use, when he had heard in the city of Memphis of the approach of my army, numbered his host to make war and battle, and drew up his army opposite to my army, with invocations to Assur, Sin, the moon entity, like Khonsu for the Egyptians. The great entities, my lord, I ordered the onslaught of my forces in a fierce battle. They put them to flight and conquered with men with arms, the men who served him, literally at the surface. Fear and terror seized him, and he turned back. He escaped from Memphis, the city of his kingdom, the place of his honor, and he fled away in ships to save his life, his soul. And in between, you got that Semitic Hubal instead of Sin. To go back a couple sentences. He left his tent standing and withdrew alone and came to Ne, meaning, the great city, Thebes. He gave orders to his men of battle to embark on all the ships and barks that were with him, and he commanded the men set over the barks. And there's a gap. I gathered together the commander of the satraps of the cities beyond the river, the servants faithful before me, them and their garrisons, their ships, the kings of Egypt, the servants faithful before me, and their garrisons and their ships, in order to drive out Tarku'u from Egypt and Ethiopia. There were more of them than before. I sent them against Thebes. Well, I'm supposed to say Nie. The city of the empire of Tarku'u, the king of Ethiopia. They went a journey of a month and 10 days. Tarku'u, when he heard of the approach of my army, left Nie, the city of his empire, and went up the river. My soldiers made a slaughter in that city. Niku, Necho, Sarludari, Paakruru, whom my father had made satraps, sinned against the commandments of Assur and the great entities, my lords, and did not keep their treaties. They despised the glory of my father and hardened their hearts to enmity. They devised a plan of rebellion and sinned willfully against their flesh, speaking thus, Tarku'u will not go back from his designs upon Egypt. He is afraid, and do ye all watch over your safety. They sent their envoys to Tarku'u, king of Ethiopia, to make peace and friendship. Thus, let peace be made in our league, and let us be friendly to each other. On this side, we pledge our faith. From no other quarter shall there be a breach in our alliance. O our Lord, they tried to entice into their league the whole army of Assur, the guardians of my dominion. They prepared what their revenge desired. Some gaps here. My judges heard of their designs and derided their coming. They intercepted their envoys with the letters and perceived the work of their treason. They bound those kings hand and foot in fetters. The justice of Assur, king of the entities, reached them because they had sinned against the commandments of the great entities at their hands. They found what my will had devised for them: Memphis, Sais, Mendes, Tanis, all the cities which they had enticed to themselves, and which formed intrigues in the desire of revenge. I subdued with arms male and female, small and great. They did not leave in them one. They brought into my presence. Thus I am Assur ban Habal, performing glorious deeds. They delivered up in the city of Karbel Mate, meaning of the great mother, which is otherwise known as Sais. About 20 kings, satraps, commanders of the cities who in Egypt had obeyed my father before me, all those kings I gave to the hand of Nabu Sezebani, who waited in my presence. Some lines are missing. Of Assur, of Istar, of the entities, my lord. More is missing. I made a great slaughter of his army. Some more missing. Over his army, Nabu, some more missing. Niku, Necho, was seized with great terror of my majesty. He left his entities in the cities of Memphis and fled to save his life in the middle city, Ne. I took that city and placed my army in it. Neku, king of Memphis and Sais. Sarludare, king of Tanis. Pesa Anhuru, Pasenhor, king of Naathu, Natho. Pa Akruru, Pakror, king of Pa Sa Tu, Pasepet in the Arabian Nome. Pu Uk Ku Na An Ne Pe, Bak and Nithi, king of Ha At Herebe, Hata Hirab, or Athribis. Na A Ke E, king of He Ne Inse, Kenensu, Heracleopolis. Pu Tu Baste, Tef Tot Bast, king of Zanu, Ta'an Zoan Tanis. U Na Munu, king of Na At Hu'u, Natho. Har Se Esu, Har Se Ese, king of Zab An Note, Thabnute, Sebenetus. Pu'u I'ama, Pama'e, king of Be'inde, Bindid, Mendes, Shu Shit Inku, Shashank, Sasankis, King of Puseru, Pa Usere Busiris, Tapna Akte, Tefnext, or Tenefaktus, King of Punu, or Pa Noob, or Mom Emphis, Bu Uk Ku Na En Nepe, Mark Ne Nefe, Bak Dunfe, King of Ahner, or On, Ipte Har Se Esu, or Pet Hor Se Ese, King of Pizza At Te Huru Unpe, or Pa something, Har and Pa, Na Ate Huru Anche Ne, next Har Na Shanu, otherwise known as King of Pa Sapte, Nute. And Bu Kur Ne Ne Et, Back Na Runth, or Bokoris, King of Pa Nute, Se Ha or Zikiao, or Takas, King of Seyaatu, or Seout, or Lycopolis, La Meintu, or Nalamoth, or Limanoth, or Nimrod, King of Hemune, Khmunu, or Hermopolis Magna, Ispematu, or Basamut, King of Ta Edne, or Tine, Thinis, Ma Anteme Auhe'e, Mentumha, King of Nea, Thebes. These are the kings, commanders, satraps who in Egypt had obeyed my father, but on account of the arms of Tarpa'u had forgotten their allegiance. I brought them back to their state of obedience. I recovered Egypt and Ethiopia, which my father had conquered. I strengthened the garrisons more than in former days. I surrounded them with ditches, with a great treasure and splendid booty. I returned safe to Nineveh. Afterwards, those kings whom I had subdued sinned against me and broke the commandments of the great entities. Some of this is missing. They revolted, and their heart was hardened. In wickedness, they plotted the artifices of rebellion. They sinned willfully. Tar'u will not go back from his designs upon Egypt. He is afraid. Do ye all watch over your own safety? They sent envoys to Tar'u, king of Ethiopia, to make peace and friendship, saying, let there be peace in our alliance, and let us be friendly to one another. On our part, we pledge our faith, and we give as security the land, the city. Never shall there be a desecration in our alliance to any other party. O our Lord, the army of Assyria, the support of my dominion, they tried to seduce their league. They prepared for their desired revenge. My judges heard of their purpose. They intercepted their envoys and their letters, and perceived the works of their treason. They seized these kings and bound them hand and foot in iron fetters and on iron chains. The vengeance of Assur, king of the entities, reached them, and because they had sinned against the commandments of the great entities, they experienced at their hands what my will had devised for them. The city of Memphis, the city of Sais, Mendes, Tanis, and all the cities which they had led away with them, I took by storm, putting to death both great and small. According to Opert's view, here followed the account of the conquest of Egypt, the return of Taharqa, his death, and the first exploits of his successor, Erdemana, who succeeded in reconquering Kemet, or Xmet, while he advanced as far as Lower Egypt. Thebes was still his capital. Remember, Upper Egypt's in the south, so the Red Land, Sardanapalus marched against Egypt the second time and defeated the army of Erdemana. M. Opert's comments upon this are too interesting to be omitted. He says, the 13 lines which follow relate the first campaign of Sardanapalus to the end. The part is in general too much mutilated to enable us to give the text, but we find that Taharaka comes to Thebes and conquers it again. Necho, now a prisoner in Assyria, obtains his pardon from Sardanapalus and returns to Egypt, the Ninevite king giving him presents with the view of detaching him from the Ethiopian. Necho makes his entry into Sais and changes its name to Kar Bel Mate, the lord of the two regions, but an Asiatic governor watches over Egypt. Meanwhile, son of Necho, who also receives an Assyrian name, Nabu Sezabani, is raised to the kingdom over the city of Mahariba, which is likewise honored with an Assyrian name, Limmer Patisi Assur, i.e., which the lieutenant of Assur governs. The name of Nebu Zebani is found in Jeremiah 39:13. Nebu Shuzban, Nebu, deliver me. The inscription gives the complete sequence of the historical events. It alone gives an account of the first capture of Thebes by the Assyrians. This event, which the cylinder doubtless set forth with further details, was the result of the Ethiopian intrigues after the death of Assur-Haddon. Taharaka, in violation of the treaty, had killed, imprisoned, and spoiled the Assyrians who were left in Egypt. Sardanapalus marches against him and joins in battle with him near the city of Carbonet. The Ethiopian, who had established his residence at Memphis, retreats on Thebes, whether the Assyrians pursue him. The Assyrians, after a 40 days march, reach Thebes and massacre its inhabitants. Its part, the first campaign, was contained in the last portion of the cylinder. After the retreat of Taharaka, Sardanapalus defeats Necho, and then follows the events forming the narrative which is preserved. The great document tells us nothing about the sequel of this campaign. Then the document continues the war of Sardanapalus against Erdemana, which we shall relate presently. Scarcely is Egypt pacified when Taharaka dies, and his stepson Erdemana succeeds him. This king invades Egypt and forces the Ninevite king to try the fortune of war a second time. Erdemana had penetrated as far as Memphis, whether Sardanapalus marches to attack him. Here's the sequel of the inscription after a chasm of about 30 lines. In my expedition, I directed my march. Erdemana heard of the advance of my expedition, and so forth, as in the text. Number 4. The record of Assurbanipal continued. So here we're looking at number 5. Erdemana heard of the advance of my expedition. He lost Meluha, Meroe, and Egypt, abandoned Memphis, and fled to Thebes to save his life. The kings, commanders, and satraps whom I had established in Egypt came to me and kissed my feet. I directed my march in pursuit of, my march after, that's what literally says, Erna Mana. I came to Thebes, the city of his dominion. He saw the strength of my army and left Thebes and fled to the city of Kipkip. Of that whole city, thanksgiving to, in adoration to, Assur and Istar, my hands took the complete possession, silver, gold, metals, stones, all the treasures of its palace whatsoever, dyed garments of Bahram and linen, great horses, maybe elephants, men and women, great and small, works of Zahali, maybe basalt, and marble, their Kalel and Manzas. The gates of their palace, there I tore away and carried to Assyria. I made spoil of the animals of the land without number, and carried them forth in the midst out of Nyeh. Got to remember to say Nyeh instead of thieves. Of my weapons, I caused a catalog to be made. I returned in safety to Nineveh, the city of my dominion. The first lines of another document would stand in immediate connection with the inscription number 3 present. Unfortunately, great gaps. Through obliteration, according to Oppert's researches, they contain the enumeration of the tributes and the booty which the king of Assyria had carried away out of Egypt, as well as the account of the end of the campaign. Sardanapalus increased the tribute imposed by his father and set up Necho's son, Nabu Zezebane, as the governor of the western districts of Maharib and Lemir Tessi, Assur. Then the death of Tirhakah is touched upon, and the king continues his record as follows. And here's number 6. The fear of the terror of Assur, my lord, carried off Tarkuu, king of Ethiopia, and his destined night came. Erdamana, the son of his wife, sat upon the throne and ruled the land. He brought Neh under his power and collected his strength. He led out his forces to make war and battle against my army. And he marched forth. It literally says he directed his step with the invocation of Assur, Sin, and the great entities, my lords. My warriors routed him in a great and victorious battle and broke his pride. Erdamana fled alone and entered Thebes, the city of his kingdom. In a march of a month and 10 days through the intricate roads, my warriors pursued him up to Thebes. They attacked that city and razed it to its foundations. Like a thunderbolt, gold, silver, and the treasure of the land, metals, precious stones, stuffs of Bahram and linen, great horses, men, male and female, huge apes, the race of the mountains without number, even for skillful counters. They took out of the midst of the city and treated as spoils. They brought it entire to Nineveh, the city of my dominion, and they kissed my feet. We have here set before us a remarkable portion of the history of Egypt, in this case, not according to an Egyptian version, but in the contemporaneous description of her enemy. In the year BCE 680, according to Oppert, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, died and Esarhaddon reigned in his stead. Toward the end of his reign, around 670 BCE, Esarhaddon attacked Egypt, defeated the reigning king of Ethiopia and Egypt, Taharqa, and set up petty kings and satraps in the land, from the northern seaboard to the city of Nyeh. The king, on his return out of Egypt, had an immense memorial tablet constructed on the surface of the rock at the mouth of the Nahar el-Kelb near Beirut as a monument of his victory over Tarkuu. Henceforth, Esarhaddon styles himself as king of Upper and Lower Egypt and Nubia. Scarcely had this king died in BCE 668 when Taharqa broke the treaties, seized Memphis, and made a league with several of the under-kings who had been acknowledged are set up by Esarhaddon for driving the Assyrians out of Egypt. At the head of the petty kings stood Nekuu of Memphis and Sais, Sarludare of Zetnu, and Pa-akruru of Pa-saptu. The Assyrian satraps and other adherents of the late king were driven out and fled to Nineveh for protection and help to punish King Taharqa. Assurbanipal, the son of Esarhaddon, who had meanwhile been crowned king and marched against Egypt with a large army. The further details are placed before us with all needful clearness in the duplicate records of the cuneiform inscriptions. In these events, a conspicuous part was played by the king Nekuu or Neku, Necho, otherwise known as, of Sais and Memphis, the son of that Tefnecht, who had opposed so long and obstinate a residence in the Ethiopian king Pianxi, carried in fetters to Nineveh. He succeeded in obtaining pardon from Sardanapalus, and his renewed establishment as petty king of Sais and Memphis of his violent end, according to the Greek accounts. The inscriptions give us no information. A thick veil covers the ensuing times in which the Ethiopians occupy the foreground of Egyptian history. Taharqa, Pianx, with his oft-named wife, Ameneritis, Shabak, and Shabatak, all appear with contemporary and are frequently introduced in connection with each other. Their family relationships are set forth with all exactness in the genealogical table that we've gone over, like 10 programs back or something? Maybe 20? No, maybe not that. It was days ago anyways. If we might give credit to the list of Manetho, they would seem to have reigned in succession over Patoris, whose capital, Nye, retains manifold evidences of their presence, but we are unable to find anything in the monuments to confirm their succession. Upon a mutilated statue of the king Shabatak at Memphis, a brief inscription calls the pharaoh, thus represented, Miptah Shabatak, but the latter name has already in ancient times been rendered half illegible by chisel strokes, obliterating the name of a usurper of the throne. At Thebes, the memorials of King Taharqa and of an Egyptian under-king have lasted the longest. The former had given liberal tokens of his regard for the sanctuary of Apis by buildings and presents. The latter had re-established the festivals of the entities after the ancient usage, provided the needful sacrifices, set up statues of the entities, after the Assyrian model, and built the sacred barks, renewed the parts that had fallen into ruin, even to the enclosing wall, and caused the sacred pool and the canals to be lined with stone from the bottom. He also served Taharqa as his faithful counselor and helper. This man was the eminent Egyptian Mentu-Mha, a son of an Espatah, priest of Yemen, and his wife Neskansu. So Kansu isn't Kansu like the Egyptian scene, the moon entity? Mentu-Mha was fourth prophet and finally second prophet of Theban Yemen, and like his father, a governor of Ne'ah, Thebes. At the same time, he is mentioned in the inscriptions as chief of the governors of Patoris. And there must have been some special reason for his high distinction in the Thebaid sense. He himself relates how he had smitten the enemy in the nomes of Patoris, recognizing him a faithful ally and friend of the Taharqa, who invested him with the government of the country named above. He is introduced into the list of the petty kings as Ma-ante-me an-he-e, Sar of Ne'ah, a tolerably faithful inscription of the Egyptian name Mentu-Mha, or is it Imha, in the son of Taharaqa's wife. Erdamana, as the Assyrian text calls him, it certainly preserved the name of the king Rudamen, who is referred to on the Egyptian monuments. In the genealogical table of he is inserted as the second king of this name, inasmuch as his grandfather, Rudimend I, is described as the father-in-law of Peftot Bast, the general and afterwards vassal of Pianxi, and hence he belonged to a considerably earlier generation. And this is chapter 11, so the beginning of chapter 11, is that what we keep on referring to here? Genealogical table of the, I'm going to see these. There's another chart. Anyways, at the length, Psamthek I, the great-grandson of Tefnex, the opponent of Pianxi, came to the forefront of history as the deliverer of his country from the conditions of the Dodecarchy, the name which the Greeks chose to describe that period. His marriage with the Ethiopian Haris Shepen-Upt, a daughter of the king Pianxi, and his beautiful queen, Ameneretis, restored peace to the distracted relations of the royal succession. Regarded in this light, the founder of the 26th dynasty appears practically as the recounselor of all rival claims, the daughter of the renowned queen of Kush and Pataris, giving her a hand to the petty king, giving her hand, marrying the petty king of Sais, brought Pataris as a wedding gift to her husband, and thus Egypt was again united into a great kingdom. So, could have been ethnic reasons, right? The splendid alabaster statue of Yemenirites. Oh, I don't know what that would be in Egyptian. That's a Greek variation of something. Which was founded at Karnak and now adorns the rooms of the Egyptian Museum in the Giza Palace near Cairo, is the most important memorial of that age. Upon it are inscribed these words: "This is an offering for the Nye Yemen Ra of Apt, the entity Mentu Ra, Lord of Nye. May he grant everything that is good and pure by which the divine lives, all that the heaven bestows and the earth brings forth to the princess, the most pleasant, the most gracious, the kindest, the most amiable queen of Upper and Lower Egypt, the sister of the king, Sebeko, the ever-living, the daughter of the deceased king, Kashta, the wife of the divine one, Yemeniritis, may she live." Upon the back is represented as saying, among other things, "I was the wife of the divine one, a benefactress to her city, a bounteous giver for her land. I gave food to the hungry, drink to the thirsty, clothes to the naked." Now, Thahba'i is the Greek name of Thebes, and it was known as Waset, and it was known as Ust. It was known as Us. It was known as Nieuw Terust. Ew the Sim. Or it was known as just plain Nye. In the Bible, it's called Na Amun. And another Greek name for the place is Dia Spalis Megala. And I think that's it for this chapter. So, Sharma, peace be upon you.